3 months, whether the news is good or bad. And now we're in the third year of this sort of reporting. We think it's important for transparency and for telling our story and being able to maybe build upon what we see as positive and also reflect on maybe where we need to see improvement. So that there's really nothing special or unusual about this news conference other than it is the standard every 3-month quarterly update. Now, it is also the case that when our quarterly update happens to coincide with the end of year, I notice a few more reporters in the room because that is a natural measuring stick. Annual numbers are, I think, probably more newsworthy, and so I do understand the level of interest in this news conference. But fundamentally, this is just our same quarterly update. But it does come at the end of the year, and it gives us the opportunity to talk about what kind of year 2005 was, especially in comparison to 2004. And so you can see from the screen, and this continues a theme that we've seen in Toledo since the peak of the pandemic. Our crime numbers came down last year in virtually every category that we measure. There were no areas where our numbers went up. There were 2 areas where they essentially stayed the same, and that would be auto thefts and homicides. But even there wasn't an increase. It was essentially the same numbers as what we saw in 2004. In 2024, I may have said 2004, I meant to say 2024. If we recall, in 2021, our numbers across the board were higher than any one of us could bear. In terms of homicides in 2021, we had 71 homicides that year. So as we reflect now 4 years later, and I know it's actually 5 years since 2021, but in terms of years that we have data for, that's 4 full years. The 38 homicides we have are 46.4% lower than what it was in 2021. So what we've seen, not just on homicides, but on every measure, everything that we measure. We saw a peak in 2021. Frankly, we saw it all around the country. Toledo was no different. The numbers came significantly down in 2022. They were then down again in 2023 from where they were in 2022. They were down again in 2024 from where it was in 2023. And in 2025, on most categories, it was down again. With homicides, it again remained the same, and I believe auto thefts was down only 1%. So I think it's a good story to tell. We're not seeing crime go up in any category, and in most categories, it is going consistently down year after year after year after year. Now we're on the 4th straight year of decline. And on the number that I think has the most import, frankly, certainly the most emotion attached to it, homicides, we're almost half of what we saw just 4 years ago, 46.4% less than what we saw in 2021. So just some of the highlights you can see from the screen. Robberies were down 26%, thefts from motor vehicles down 23%, burglaries down 10%. Again, auto thefts only down by 1%. Homicides, again, the same as the year before. But sometimes people, I think, cynically say, well, regardless of what the homicides number are, there's as many shootings as, there's more shootings and shots fired and people shooting than ever before. That's not true either. Actually, incidents of people being shot was down 15% from the year before. So everything is moving down, and on the most dramatic and high-profile number, again, homicides, 46% less than what we saw in 2021. So it is, I think it's an encouraging story. It does not mean we're satisfied. We are never satisfied. We won't be satisfied until there are 0 homicides in Toledo. And even though intellectually we know that that is unlikely to ever happen in a city with 270,000 people, it's always our goal. And so we're going to continue, we're going to celebrate the successes that we've had over the last several years and work to continue to move in that right direction. I do want to say, before I turn it over to the chief for any remarks he may have, I do want to point out something that I want to flag as we go forward. It's always been a priority of this administration, but I don't know that it's often thought of in the same way as it should be, because a crime isn't necessarily always committed. But I'm talking about traffic safety and violence from automobiles. We have seen our homicide numbers now come down so dramatically over the last several years, and unfortunately we've seen death from automobiles rise so much, whether it's individuals who are walking being hit and killed, on a bike being hit and killed, et cetera. Last year, I believe we came in at 20. I might be wrong in that. I'll have to double check. Again, it's not part of these stats, although in the future I might want to think about including that. Again, homicides have come down so much, and these sort of traffic, car, pedestrian, or bicyclist deaths have grown so much. We almost want to start thinking about them as the same level of concern. It's not often thought of in the same way because there's almost always acrimony and hostility involved in an incident that results in a homicide. There's often a confrontation, a dysfunctional relationship in some way. That's not necessarily the case when someone is driving too quickly and hits a pedestrian and kills him or her. So often it's not thought about in the criminal justice system the same way, and so a lot of times it gets ignored. But if we're serious about protecting human life and safety, we need to start thinking about that really in the same terms. For all of the effort and discussion that we have in this community around homicides, and we should, and I'm glad we do, and I'm glad the numbers have gone down so much, we need to start thinking of the unfortunate amount of loss of life that we're seeing on our streets due to automobiles, because those numbers unfortunately are starting to meet with homicides coming down and these traffic deaths going up. So our community should see that if we're thinking about safety holistically. And again, it's not the same. It's not a bad guy in a mask and like the imagery that we get from comic books and stuff. It's a different incident, but at the end of the day, human life is lost, and in our community, they're actually unfortunately about to meet in terms of level of, in terms of the numbers. So I just throw that out there because that was an unfortunate trend we saw last year, and it's going to be something that I know we continue to talk about, even if it doesn't necessarily toggle into policing in the same way. It has everything to do with the safety of our community, and we can do things to address that with the way we design roads, with the way we design neighborhoods. You might not think of it in these terms, but the more trees that are planted on a street, the slower traffic tends to be. You don't realize this, but when you're driving on a street that has a lot of trees, the evidence says you go a little slower because you don't know maybe if a kid's going to run out behind the tree and chase the ball that they've been playing with, and your foot just comes off the gas when you're driving down a street with trees. When you're on a street with no trees, you go a little faster, and that makes it more dangerous. So, from an urban design standpoint, that's one way. When roads are narrow, cars move more slowly. When they're wider, they go more quickly. When you have more 90-degree turns, cars go slowly. When you have gentle bending curves, cars go more quickly. So I don't want to sort of derail this news conference on what might seem like an aside, but I guess I want to encourage the community to think about it not as an aside, but as safety in a more holistic sense. And unfortunately, we are seeing, even as we celebrate homicides coming down, we're seeing this other sort of loss of life in our public spaces grow. So I can tell you, when we brought Chief Krull, now Safety Director Krull, back from his brief retirement, we talked to him about what it means to be the safety director. And while traditionally, a safety director oversees police and fire, and he still does, and there's no question about that, we've talked about his new role, his role involving sort of a newer understanding of the more holistic sense of safety and how blight in a neighborhood addresses safety, how, again, slowing traffic addresses safety. So anyhow, my point is, I think you're going to hear me going forward talking more about that. And I just want to highlight that maybe as a statistic you'll see in future news conferences like this, because, we are all about safety and protecting the citizens of Toledo and reducing the loss of life. And while we are so happy that we've seen homicides go down as much as they have, we do need to be aware that, especially in the late last year, if you remember December, I think we had 3 in the last 10 days or so, right around Christmas. We are seeing more loss of life on our streets when it comes to the interaction of cars and bicyclists and kids walking home. It's just as heartbreaking. So, again, bit of an aside. Thank you for bearing with me, but I just wanted to highlight that as another aspect of safety. But in general, as has been the case now for, every year we've been doing these quarterly news conferences, and really now 4 years in a row, we continue to see the numbers come down pretty steadily across the board. I think there's a lot of reasons for that. I think when it comes to crime, crime is a complex social disorder, if you want to think about it, clinically, technically, academically. And so anything that is complex is not likely caused by any one thing, and so it's not going to be solved by any one thing. So over these last 4 years, people have asked me, well, geez, our numbers are really, trending the right direction. They're really coming down. Why is it? I'd love to be able to point to one simple thing. The fact is, there is no one simple reason that crime is so much lower in Toledo. I think it is a combination of factors. Part of it is that we have grown the size of the police force. Over time, our force is larger than it was when I became mayor, and we've worked hard to have the police class sizes grow to the point where we can enjoy a net gain of new officers. This is not to say that all you have to do to, address our homicide rate is hire a few more police officers. I don't think anyone believes that, but you do need a certain base level of officers to do the kind of policing that we know works, the kind of community policing that we know works. You do need to have more officers, and so that is, and we've done that, and that's one reason. I think the amount of youth programming that we've invested in the summers in particular has been helpful. Roughly 100 free programs a year for kids in the summer, not just sports, although that has been part of it, but any kind of enrichment, teaching kids how to podcast, if that's what they want to do, to teaching them how to ride. I think one year we had a horse riding class that we offered, scuba diving we did last year. I mean, you want to learn how to garden, cook, anything. There's about 100 of these programs free to the citizens that we've offered over the last 4 years. I think that has been helpful. What we have done to fight blight in neighborhoods, I think, has been helpful, and I think our Muncie office, the Mayor's Office of Neighborhood Safety and Engagement, the work that Malcolm Cunningham and his team do from an early intervention standpoint. Now we have some of our Muncie workers in the high schools. I think that helps too. So you add all of that up together, and it explains why we're seeing numbers move in the right direction. So speaking personally, I'm encouraged by what we've seen. We want to keep it up, and we want to highlight other aspects of public safety, particularly around automobiles that are moving too quickly, and the safety challenges that they raise as we go forward into this new year of 2026. So those are my comments. I want to turn it over to Chief Mike Trendley, who's really been, during this time of improving crime stats, he's been the chief. He's been the chief that has seen these numbers move in the right direction. So I want to certainly give him and his team all the credit in the world for being a part of our efforts that have shown these better results. So, Chief Trendley.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And I'd like to say thank you for your support for our department, because the reality is we can't do our job without that, and that allows me to kind of pass that along to our officers to get them out there every day. So I think that is an important caveat that we don't talk about much either. So the mayor touched on a lot of the stats. I just want to, kind of hit on a few. As he said, homicides are always seem to be that bright light that everybody wants to look at. I kind of want to talk about some of the underlying things within those homicides. Homicides are kind of hard sometimes because it's so many different factors that come into play whether a shooting ends up in a homicide or not. And so for us, addressing that root cause behind the homicides, especially our shootings, is something that we do every day, take very seriously, and we have a dedicated team that is, not only doing enforcement, education, but investigation as well. And when we look at our shooting incidents as a whole, we're down 16% this year. And that's a continuous decrease in our shooting incidents, and as we talked about, 15% reduction in persons shot. So I think that's pretty important. Our detectives and our CJIC are out there every day trying to get illegal guns off the street, trying to make a dent in those known shooters. And our detectives, our homicide clearance rate again this year was 80%. That's an incredible number. We've continued to be up in the 80 percentile range for the last several years on solving homicides, and that's huge, because anytime we can get a known shooter, a known murderer off the street, that usually translates to less killings, less shootings. So while we can't arrest our way out of crime, and as the mayor said, the ecosystem of criminal justice and addressing crime is huge. We're one component in that. And I just have to say, as a chief, I'm very proud of our department, because our officers do a great job day in and day out, whether it's snowing 10 inches and 20 below zero with the wind chill, they're still out there doing it every single day. So I think that's important, that our community knows we are here for them, we are looking out for them. Mayor mentioned talking about the size of our department. That's critical for us, because it allows us to do those things, to go above and beyond the simple act of responding to our 911 calls for service. Now, when I say simple, that is probably the most critical aspect of a police department that we do. That's probably one of the most important things we do, is when you pick up that phone and call 911, you have an officer show up at your door. So I don't want to diminish that, but having the extra officers to be out there and do our crime suppression activities, whether it's our team initiatives, or our gang sweeps, or our air operation initiatives with Ohio State Highway Patrol. They're a big, huge partner for us. They're there for us constantly, and talking about traffic safety. Through Ohio State Highway Patrol, we do air enforcement activities on the expressways to try to slow people down. So those are things that we do on a day in and day out basis. Having those extra manpower allows us to do those extra activities, but it also allows us to do the things that we do community focused as well, right? So our community service officers being out there and being in meetings and showing up to community events, passing out those gun locks, trying to make sure that we reduce those accidental shootings where a kid gets a gun in their hand that they shouldn't have in their hand. So we're trying to do our part to make our community safer from so many different directions. So I just, it's great to see the numbers come down. Robbery numbers were fantastic this year. Those are just less victims in our community. So I'm very proud of that. I'm very proud of our officers for what they do every single day. And, we're going to continue to go forward in 26. We're not letting our foot off the gas pedal, but we're going to continue to do our initiatives. We're going to change up our initiatives a little bit. Probably this year we're not going to do the team initiatives on the quarterly that we have been doing. We're doing more monthly targeted initiatives with our watch commanders on each individual shift. Our team initiatives were great. But the problem is, we've been doing them for about 4 years now. They've become a little bit stale, and so officers are kind of go through the motions. So allowing our commanders that are out there on the street every single day to kind of hone in their targeted initiatives gives them a little bit of, buy into it, gives us a little bit of a new life, if you will, and to continue to improve our product that we're, giving to our community. Now, when I say the team initiatives, there's a lot of parts of that team initiative that are very important. Those will still happen in different aspects. And one of the most important things, and the mayor touched on it a little bit, about blight. Working with urban beautification and our sister departments across the city is something that our community services officers will continue to do. We'll continue to try to make our neighborhoods you know, cleaner, safer, you know, eliminating those areas that are, you know, been proven to attract crime. So we're going to continue to do that along with all those other enforcement activities that we do, whether it be our gang sweeps or our highway patrol sweeps with their, you know, they're huge supporters of us. So I just want to say, you know, I continue to be pleasantly surprised the fact that we can continue to reduce crime year after year, especially in a lot of these categories. It gets harder as these numbers come down to reduce them, but continuing to do that is just a testament to our process. Our process works, whether it be our CompStats or our intelligence-led policing. Our analysts are tremendous, getting the products, getting the information out to our officers so we know where we need to be. So, you know, once again, thanks for everything that everybody does, including our community.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, that's the end of our presentation, so any questions?
Mayor, could I ask, my understanding is that the homicide rate nationally is down quite a bit this year in other big cities, and that it's the lowest it's been in decades. Question is, I mean, certainly it's great to not have an increase, but why didn't ours go down as well?
Well, I think when you look at it from the peak of 2021, it has gone down. The chief made a good point. When you, we're talking about percentages here, and so when you enjoy the kinds of decreases we have year after year, at some point, it's hard to, I mean, these are percentage decreases from the year before. So robberies have went down, let's say, from 21 to 22. Then from 22 to 23, they went down more. 23 to 24, they went down more. Then on top of all that, from 24 to 25, they went down 26% more. I mean, I guess it's a question of how statistics work. It's just hard to continue to build large percentage decreases when they've already come down so much. That being said, we are ahead of the national average when it comes to even homicides. You talk about, I mentioned that since 2021, homicides are down 46.4%. Nationally, since 2021, I think if you look across the country, they're down about 25%. That toggles to what we said this time last year. I think last year we maybe had seen a 30% reduction in homicides, and nationally it was only 10%. So we are actually running ahead of the national average when it comes even to homicides. You know, I know if you just isolate 1 year, it might not look that way, but I guess I just would encourage people to look at the larger arc of the last several years. So.
Okay, and I might have missed it when you, oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah, I think.
No, I just wanted to add something. So in 2023, we saw a significant decrease in our homicides. And at that point, we were doing it faster and better than everybody else. If you would look at the national trend in 2023, a lot of your major cities were still going up at that point. So we reduced them faster and earlier, and that's why eventually it's starting to slow down. But I think, as the mayor points out, looking back to the peak, we are still kind of on a huge reduction in our homicides.
And Chief, juveniles with weapons, what's working or not working aspect of that?
Yeah, so unfortunately, we've had some significant incidents this year, and, you know, trying to figure out a way for our parents to lock up guns and have guns not accessible to their teenage children or their friends is something that we're still continuing to work on. You know, it's tragic when these things happen, but at some point, you know, our families kind of have to look inward and say, what can we do to, you know, prevent our kids from having guns and having a tragic incident occur?
If I could add something there, and I don't know if this is even newsworthy yet because it hasn't been introduced. At the end of the day, Chief Trenley and his department can only enforce the laws that are on the books. Perhaps, well, certainly motivated by some of the higher profile and truly heartbreaking cases of children playing around with guns and harming and killing themselves. I think of the one on Walker over in West Toledo, where 12 or 13-year-olds, I think, might have been their age. They were playing video games and playing around with the gun, and off and killed one of the young people. We just had one recently, again, the evidence seems to indicate they were just sort of playing around, and you know, I think that young man is still with us, and we hope that his recovery continues, regardless. I know members of City Council have talked to me, and we are working with the law department to see if there are ordinance, to see if there's to see if we can strengthen municipal law to make parents accountable, more accountable than they are now in situations like that. Becomes complicated legally when you start layering in different you know, federal and state protections, but I think intuitively all of us as parents feel the same way when we hear about a case like this. Again, where there's no acrimony, there's no fight. You know, it's one thing when there's a disagreement or whatever, drug deal gone wrong, or you know, husband and wife fighting with each other and a homicide happens. You know, you sort of compartmentalize that in one part of your brain, at least I do. But when you have, you know, friends who are over playing video games, and they, you know, one 13-year-old shows, you know, the other 13-year-old this new thing that they have in the house, and one thing leads to another, and there's an accidental shooting that ends up in a death. I mean, to me, that just hits me a little differently as a parent. And member, I don't want to. I don't think she would mind, but Councilwoman Teresa Morris, in particular, is someone who's talked to the administration about, you know, do we need to strengthen municipal law in those cases so that the parents are more legally accountable for the guns in their home and what might happen. I'm not sure where that's going to lead. You know, the Second Amendment and some other things provide protections that might make it impossible for us to pursue that kind of accountability, but it's something we're looking at. I just wanted to throw that out there. I know our law director is taking a deep dive to see if there are things that we can do to strengthen local ordinances, at least on that part of the equation, on the part of the equation where there's a gun in the house that kids get their hands on, and you know, something tragic happens. So we're looking into that. I think I cut you off. You had a question earlier.
Yeah, point of clarification, I might have missed this. You talked a lot about the increase in deaths caused by vehicular accidents, and I wondered how much of an increase there's been there.
That was sort of the product of me going off script, I guess. So we didn't come today with those stats. I think that's something that we could easily provide to you. I think in future news conferences we will. I know that at the end of November last year, I think we had 17 of those sorts of deaths, and I know in December, I mean, I can just think of, I know there were at least 3, so that's where I came up with that number of 20. But at any rate, I don't have anything to compare that to the year before. We can get that to you. That is my fault for going off script. But it just strikes me intuitively that even as we're encouraged that the direction homicides are going down, I know that number's going up. And we've just put so much focus on that in terms of building neighborhoods, designing neighborhoods, trying to slow traffic, that it's just something I wanted to mention. But I don't have those stats. We will get those to you. And then I do think going forward, I want to kind of keep an eye on that, because those just seem so preventable.
Is the removal of the speeding, what did you call them, on the trail and other places, the speeding cameras? Has that been a factor, or is that not something that is really?
I will provide my answer, but I'd be anxious to hear what the chief says. I think anytime you remove a tool from law enforcement, it has the potential to make the community less safe. I know people had opinions about those cameras. I get it. Certainly the state representative from Cincinnati who once got a speeding ticket because of one of those cameras and threw a temper tantrum and then got rid of them for the entire state. Certainly he had an opinion, and that's why we don't have them anymore. Nonetheless, if you remember the debate in the state legislature when they were taking them away from cities, the law enforcement community at large was for them. The statewide, what's called the Buckeye Sheriff's Association, whatever the chiefs, I mean the statewide police groups, the statewide FOP, I think they're called the Buckeye Sheriff's Association. Again, I'm off script and this is what happens. But all of the big statewide policing organizations lobbied the legislature to keep those tools in place. Now that was not enough to win the day, especially when a key committee chair had gotten a ticket and was throwing a temper tantrum. But it is worth noting that the law enforcement community statewide wanted those cameras, fought for those cameras, and it was an example of the legislature saying no to law enforcement, which is rare. It's typically, police have a loud voice down in Columbus, but in that case, they were outvoted. So I know the police wanted those cameras, not just in Toledo, but statewide. I think Chief Kroll was the chief of police in Toledo when that happened. I remember him being a proponent of them. I don't see how they couldn't have been helpful. They were at least a tool. They were another tool that law enforcement had to make our community safer, and they were taken away from us on a fit of pique and out of spite. And I do believe we are less safe as a community as a result. A lot of times people focus on the financial part of it. We were always focused on the safety part of it, and I don't think it is a coincidence that, we've seen those cameras taken away, and either coincidentally or not, we've seen traffic fatalities go up. So that's just me as a non-police officer. What my take is, I'd be anxious to see what Chief Trenley has to say, if you have anything to say on that.
Thanks. Yeah, so for me, 100%, it was something that helped us slow down traffic, helped us have cars stop at lights. That camera at the intersection is like having a police officer sitting there all the time. We gave plenty of warning and visual displays and alerting drivers. So alerting those drivers to slow down and to stop for those red lights, I think helped. I would also say our cameras and lasers on the expressway that we were using slowed down our traffic. While I haven't done a study on this, but I would guarantee you that our average speed on 475 between Talmadge and the 75 split is a lot higher today than it was when we had those laser cameras. Now, are they a perfect system? There's a lot of talk about, we need to see the officer on the side of the road. That'll help slow traffic down, all those kinds of things. I would also venture to say you getting tickets will also help you slow down because it's a financial impact. Well, it's not a financial gain for the city, but impacting you in ways to, there is a punishment for doing things that are illegal. And whatever kind of punishment you can impose to change your behavior, and for that, the least amount of punishment that you can do to improve or change your behavior is probably the most important thing. It also makes our officers safer. We have, hits that happen on the expressway when officers are out there doing traffic or handling accidents. People run into our police cars. So to me, it was a piece of technology that maybe not perfect. It worked. Its intended goal was to slow people down, to have them stop running red lights, and I believe that's what it did.
Not to dwell on Mayor Kapsakevich going off script, but
Change the focus of the news conference.
of the vehicular accidents leading to death, do we know, is that a symptom of more alcohol-related accidents, or do we know? I mean, some are, some aren't,
Yeah.
but do we have any idea if alcohol-related accidents are on the rise or not?
So when I looked in December, because we thought we had a couple high-profile that involved alcohol, so we thought there was something happening, and we looked, and the reality was they were consistent to the year before. So it's not. We don't think it's an increase in alcohol-related fatalities. Speed is a factor. It continues to be a factor. I think, and I'm not trying to diminish the inherent danger of driving while intoxicated, but speed seems to cause a lot of our accidents.
Chief, auto thefts, the Kia boys, Is that something on your radar, ongoing issue?
It is an ongoing issue. I encourage everybody that has a Kia or a Hyundai to get out there and get the patch to make sure you're doing things to make your vehicle less easy to steal. But yeah, that is still a factor. We saw a big increase a couple years back on that, and we've been fighting that. But to keep it under control, to try to keep it at least almost level, has been a significant push on our part.
Is that one targeted group that's being looked at, or what is that organization?
So we do have a bunch of juveniles that are working together to steal multiple cars and joyride and sometimes commit other crimes with them. You know, we're doing our best to arrest them and get our courts to keep them because, you know, it sometimes is seen as a minor offense because it's a property offense. But there's a lot of other things that come into play here, and, you know, I've had some good conversations with our juvenile judges about it, and, you know, expressing the importance of when you're seeing multiple cases, repeat offenders, that we need to do something about them.
Are they stealing them, then going on joyrides, or what are you seeing?
Combination. A lot of times it is, you know, transportation. It is, they'll steal 2 or 3 together and they'll be racing each other around and messing around that way. So there is a combination of things. We do see them sometimes see thefts for criminal activity to be committed as well. But a lot of it is either joyriding or I need to get over on the other side of town.
You both mentioned blight and the city's work to reduce it throughout the city. In 2026, is there any particular areas or neighborhoods that you guys are looking to target specifically in terms of blight?
So right now, I don't have a overall plan on what areas we're gonna hit because we kind of do those as we do our suppression activities in those areas. So as we start, or if there's another type of crime that's happening in that area and our watch commanders are seeing it, or we have a crime series that happens in that area, part of what will happen now is our community service officers will go in and start flagging properties for blight, working with our code enforcement, working with our urban beautification to remove that trash, clean that alleys out, board up those homes, tow those junk cars, those kinds of things. So it's gonna be more ad hoc areas now, not an overall reaching, all of our resources are gonna be focused on one area.
Does any of that have to do with the possibility of a smaller police force by the end of this year and not having the resources to be proactive rather reactive?
No, actually not at all. So this is something that's kind of, we've been talking about it regardless of the size of our police class or before I even knew what the size of our police class was. So we're always looking at ways to improve our process. We have a lot of good conversations with our commanders inside those meetings about how we can move forward, what we can do to better equip our officers, better, you know, give them more information from our analysts to actually get out there and make an impact in the area they serve.
And for the mayor, this is something I have already talked to Chief Friendly about, but there is a possibility for a smaller police force by the end of the year just due to retirement and a smaller class. And that's what, building the police force is one of the things that you have said continually has helped in decreasing these numbers. But looking ahead to this year, is there anything from your office that you're planning to do to kind of help in any sort of way with that?
Well, we're proud of the work we've done to grow the size of the police force. I mean, before I became mayor, the size of the police force had declined literally for 22 consecutive years. And so the work that we've done to grow it is not something that I want to, I don't want people to think that that happened easily. It was not easy. You know, I think as we've talked about recently, our city budget is in a different place now than it was, you know, 3 years ago, 5 years ago. And so I think ultimately, you know, with police and fire take a overwhelming majority of our entire city budget. When you look at some of the financial challenges we have from a budget perspective, there's no way to address those financial gaps without, you know, threatening the public safety that we all hold so dear. So ultimately, this is what you're asking is a budget question, and we are reviewing every option that we have. That's why there have been conversations about entertainment fees. That's why there are conversations about, you know, should we have a police and a special police and fire levy in November, you know, to help make sure that we have the safety forces we need. That's not a new thought that I just unlike my riff on traffic fatalities, that's not a new thought that I just had in the back of my head as I drove over here today. That's something I talked about when we released the budget back in November. I guess I would say we're continuing to look at those things. We know that we need, what we have in our organization isn't a spending problem, actually, it's a revenue problem. If we have a spending problem in Toledo, it's that we don't spend near enough. We spend less per capita than any other big city in Ohio. We spend less than Columbus, than Cincinnati, than Cleveland, than Akron, than Dayton, and actually we spend less than all of those cities on every subcategory. We spend less on police than Akron, Dayton, we spend less on fire, less on kids, less on parks, so I know ideologically some people are just convinced that, we're spending like drunken, that's just not, the facts do not support that worldview. In Toledo, it is the case that what we have is a revenue problem. And so that is why when we announced the budget, I talked about some of the creative things that we're considering long-term that would address this problem. So for 2026, we feel really good about where we are. And I have every reason to believe we'll continue to see statistics like this. But going forward, with City Council, we're going to have some conversations about, how do we address that revenue problem? It is, I know other cities, the mayor of Cincinnati, about 2 weeks ago, just announced that they're putting a issue on their ballot this November specifically for police and fire. I know that's been announced. I got in trouble when I said they're doing the same thing in Columbus because the mayor just personally told me that, but they hadn't announced it yet. So I'll give him a chance to announce it. But I think when you look around the state and you see other cities doing things like that, it is the city of Toledo needs to be thinking along those terms also. So we're not announcing that today, but we continue to have to make sure that we have the revenue to make sure we have the police force of the right size. So we will.
You monitor also then if there's going to be the property tax initiative on the ballot, and that'll determine.
Well, sure. Yeah, that we're not immune from that conversation, but this is where government gets confusing for the citizens. As much attention as there will be about the property tax in Ohio this year, and I think everyone knows that there's an initiative to put on the statewide ballot something that would get rid of the property tax. We're certainly aware of that. That would have almost no impact on the city of Toledo. The engine that fuels city government is the payroll income tax. We get a little money from inside millage on the property tax, but not much. We're one of the few cities in the state that does not have a voted property tax for the city of Toledo. So when you think property taxes, you think of the schools, certainly things like 911, the library, the zoo, the metro parks. They would care an awful lot about the property tax and what happens to the property tax. There wouldn't be as much effect in the city, just a really small effect. For us, it's the income tax, and so we are kind of not as directly affected by whatever happens statewide on the property tax. Yeah.
And you're talking about the 3/4% income tax?
The 3/4% income tax, yes. So, but again, I've talked about that before, but now we're starting to see other cities. Cincinnati, I can now say publicly. I'll still won't say anything about Columbus until the mayor announces it publicly, and not just to me at a reception. But other cities are starting to, they've announced that this year they're going to the ballot for their police and fire and safety services, and that's something that we're going to have to take a look at as well. But again, we've talked about that before. All right, thank you.